So in this video, we're going to talk about how to solve real-world rational equations. So let's go ahead and review. Let's practice solving this rational equation. So remember, when you're solving rational equations, you always want to start off by multiplying both sides by the LCD. Remember that the LCD is the least common denominator of the denominators that are in the problem. So notice the two denominators I have are 4 and x. So my least common denominator is just going to be found by multiplying them because they have no common factors. So my LCD is 4x. So what I'm going to do now is multiply 4x on both sides of my equation. So I have 4x times x minus 2 over 4 equals 4x times 5 over x. So when I do this, what happens is I have a common factor of 4, which cancels. So on the left, I just have x times x minus 2. On the right, I have a common factor of x that cancels, so I have 4 times 5. So now I just need to distribute this x. So I have x times x, that's x squared, minus x times 2, that's 2x, and that equals 20. So now this is a quadratic equation. Remember, to solve quadratic equations, I need to put them in standard form. Remember that standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So I'm going to subtract 20 from both sides of this equation to get it equal to 0. So I have x squared minus 2x minus 20 equals 0. So now let's work on solving this quadratic. X squared minus 2x minus 20 equals 0. If you try factoring, you'll notice that this cannot be solved by factoring. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and use the quadratic formula, which you remember is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So let's go ahead and define the values of a, b, and c. So x squared doesn't have a number in front of it, so remember there's an implied 1. So that's a, here's b, and here's c. So a is 1, b is negative 2, and c is negative 20. So when we plug that in, we get x equals negative of b, so negative of negative 2, plus or minus the square root of negative 2 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 20. And that's all divided by 2 times 1. So we have x equals negative 2 is just going to be 2, plus or minus the square root of negative 2 squared is 4. And then we have minus 4 times 1 times negative 20, so that's negative 80. That minus negative is just going to become plus, and that's all over 2. So we have x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 84 over 2. Remember, whenever you have a radical in a problem, you always want to look at the radical and see if there's any way that you can make it better. So the square root of 84 can actually be made better. Remember, the perfect square that evenly divides 84 is 4. So this can be written as the square root of 4 times the square root of 21. The square root of 4 is 2, so we have 2 times the square root of 21. So we have x equals 2 plus or minus 2 square root of 21 over 2. So notice that now all three terms have a common factor of 2 in them, so I can go ahead and cancel that common factor. So when I do that, I end up with x equals 1 plus or minus the square root of 21. And that is my solution. So what we're going to do is we're going to expand this idea and we're going to apply what we just learned to solving word problems. So remember, when you solve word problems, you want to use this 4-step process. You always want to start off by understanding the problem. So that's where we're going to start. Then you're going to make a plan, and then we're going to solve it, and then we're going to reflect on our solutions. So when you solve problems involving rational equations, you always start off by reading the problem carefully. Remember, you can always highlight, circle, or outline any important information. Then identify the variables, determine any equations or formulas that you need to solve the problem, then solve the problem. And then remember that since we're solving rational equations, you need to multiply both sides of the equation by the LCD in order to find the solution. Remember to always check for extraneous solutions and also to make sure that your solutions make sense given the context of the problem. So let's look at this first example. So in this first example, it says that a company manufactures milk bottling equipment. This month, the company wants the cost to manufacture the machines to be half the price they earn for each machine. The company has found that the cost to manufacture machines is modeled by the expression t minus a half over t, where t is the number of machines manufactured. The price the company can earn for the machines is 2 times t minus a half over 5, where t is the number of machines manufactured. How many machines should the company manufacture this month? Okay, so let's look at the important information. So it says they want the cost to be half of the price they earn for each machine. Okay, so they want cost to equal half of the price. And then it gives us some formulas. So it says that the cost can be given by the formula t minus 1/2 over t. It gives us a definition of a variable. So it says t is the number of machines manufactured. So I'm just going to go ahead and write this down. So it says cost is t minus 1/2 over t. And then t is number of machines. Like, this is what I meant by outlining important information. Because I know it's a lot of sentences in this problem and it can be kind of confusing. So it's always good to kind of like summarize it. And then it says the price can be described by this expression, right? So once again, we have another formula. So we have price equals 2 times t minus 1/2 over 5. Okay, so it wants us to figure out how many machines they should manufacture this month. So let's figure out what we've got going on here. So notice that it says cost is going to be 1/2 of the price. Okay, so that's going to be important. So what I can do is I can take that and substitute in these expressions that I have. So instead of cost, I can write t minus 1/2 over t, right? I just substituted this expression for the cost. So I want cost to equal 1/2 of price. Well, price is given by this expression, 2 times t minus 1/2 over 5. So now let's work on simplifying this. So now this is just a rational equation, right? So let's work on simplifying this. So here I have a 1/2 and I have a 2 and I have a 5. Okay, so that 1/2, do you notice that 2 and 2, they're just going to go ahead and cancel. So when they go ahead and cancel, I have t minus 1/2 over t equals t minus 1/2 over 5. So let's figure out how we're going to work on simplifying that. So t minus 1/2 over t equals t minus 1/2 over 5. Well, since it's a rational equation, I want to go ahead and find the LCD, right? I have two fractions. So the common denominator is just going to be the product of the factors, right? Because they have no common factor. So the common denominator is going to be 5t. So I'm going to multiply this left side by 5t, and I'm going to multiply this right side by 5t. Well, notice that the common factor of t and t will cancel. So I have 5 times t minus 1/2, and that equals, and then here I have the common factor of 5 that cancels. So I have t minus 1/2 times t. So I'm going to distribute this 5 over here. So I have 5t minus 5 over 2 equals, and then here the t distributes. So I have t squared minus t over 2. So once again, I have a quadratic, right? Even though my terms are all on opposite sides, I have a quadratic. So I'm just going to set everything equal to 0. So I'm going to start off by subtracting 5t from both sides. So when I do that, I get negative 5 over 2 equals t squared. And then, okay, so here, this is like a 1/2 t, right? So I have negative 1/2 minus 5. So that's negative 5.5, which if I write that as a mixed number, that's just going to be negative 11 over 2. So I have negative 11 over 2t. And then now I need to go ahead and move this negative 5 over 2. So I'm going to add 5 over 2 to both sides. So when I do that, I get 0 equals t squared minus 11 over 2t plus 5 over 2. So now I need to work on solving this quadratic equation. So to solve this quadratic equation, I'm going to once again use the quadratic formula. So I have t squared minus 11 over 2t plus 5 over 2. So if I use my quadratic formula, this is going to be a, here's b, and then here's c. So I have x, well in this case actually I have t, so I'm going to say t equals negative b, so negative 11 over 2, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times 1 times c, which is 5 over 2. And that's all over 2 times 1. So that's going to give me 11 over 2 plus or minus the square root of, let's see, 11 over 2 squared, that's going to be 121 over 4 minus, okay, so if we do 4 times 1 times 5 over 2, that is all going to turn into 10. So minus 10, and that's all over 2. So we have that equals 11 over 2 plus or minus the square root of 121 over 4 minus, let's get a common denominator. So I'm going to multiply this by 4 over 4. So we have minus 40 over 4, and that's all over 2. And so now we have 11 over 2 plus or minus the square root of, let's see, 121 minus 40 is going to give us 81. So we have 81 over 4, and that's over 2. Now when we take the square root, we have 11 over 2 plus or minus. Remember, this is just going to be the square root of 81 over the square root of 4. So that's going to be 9 over 2, and that's over 2. So we have two solutions now, right? We have 11 over 2 plus 9 over 2 over 2. And we also have 11 over 2 minus 9 over 2 over 2. So 11 over 2 plus 9 over 2 is going to be 20 over 2. And that's over 2. So we have 10 over 2, which equals 5. Our other solution is going to be 11 over 2 minus 9 over 2. So that is going to be 2 over 2, which is 1. So we have 1 over 2, which is 1/2. Okay, so now we're going to figure out which solution makes sense given the context of the problem. And what doesn't make sense is, like, we're talking about machine manufacturing, right? So we're saying how many machines should this company manufacture? And if we think about it, they're not really going to manufacture half of a machine, right? I mean, that's kind of, it doesn't make any sense. So we're going to say 1/2 is like our not sensible solution, right? No machine is going to be manufactured in half. So we would say 5 is a reasonable solution, okay? So 5 machines is going to be our answer because it does not make sense to use a company to manufacture half a machine. Okay, so in this problem, it says a company advertised a job in sales. The job pays a flat rate of $200 per week plus a commission of 10% of the employee's weekly sales. The newest employee is earning $30 per hour based on a 40-hour work week. What are the newest employee's weekly sales? So what you're going to do is you're going to figure out, okay, what's the important information here? So we have a flat rate of $200 plus a commission of 10% of the weekly sales. So this employee is earning $30 an hour based on a 40-hour work week, and we want to know what their weekly sales are. So it doesn't give us any variables, but we'll just define them ourselves. Okay, so we're talking about weekly sales. So we'll just go ahead and call weekly sales S. So we need to figure out what are their weekly sales, right? We want to know what the value of S is. So weekly sales equals what? Well, we know that they get paid a flat rate of $200 plus 10% of the sales, right? So that would be like 0.1 S. So that is going to be the total of like how much earned. Well, if we think about it, their hourly rate, okay, is $30 per hour. So like 30 per hour is the rate. So if you think about it, like how much you earn, okay, so if we just think in real world context, if we do the money earned over the number of hours, that tells you like the rate, okay? So the number of hours. So if we set up like a fraction like that, that would tell us the rate of pay, right? How much money per hour. So we can plug in what we have and figure out what this equation would look like. See, the amount of money earned we figured out is going to be 200 plus 0.1 S. Okay, that's how much they earn. That goes in the numerator. So divided by the number of hours, well, it tells us they work 40 hours a week. Okay, so that divided by 40 is going to be their hourly rate. Well, it says their hourly rate is $30 per hour, so we know that that's going to be equal to 30. So now we have a rational equation we can use to solve for S. So like we talked about before, you're going to multiply by the LCD. Well, there's only one denominator, right? So this is going to be one of those where you can actually crisscross multiply, right? So when we do that, we get on the left side, we get 40 times 30, and that equals 1 times 200 plus 0.1 s. So 40 times 30 is going to be 1200. So we have 1200 equals 200 plus 0.1 s. So let's go ahead and solve this problem. 1200 equals 200 plus 0.1 s. We're going to subtract 200 from both sides. And when we do that, we get 1000 equals 0.1 s. Then divide both sides by 0.1. And when we do that, we get 1000 divided by 0.1. So that gives us 10,000. And that equals the value of s. So we have 10,000 equals s. And that is a reasonable number for sales, right? So if somebody's working in sales, it does make sense that they would, maybe sell about 10,000 items per week. So that is a sensible solution, so we can use that as our final answer. Okay, so remember when you're solving word problems with rational equations, remember to read the problem carefully, identify any variables, and then to figure out any equations or formulas needed to solve the problem. Go ahead and solve the problem. Remember, you need to multiply by the LCD and then check for any extraneous solutions.